Welcome to Potter Revisited, episode 70. I'm Tori.
And I'm Shay.
Today we are jumping into chapter 10 of Goblet of Fire, Mayhem at the Ministry.
Or, as we like to call it, why not the moon? Jumping into this chapter. It's basically just fallout from last chapter.
Yeah.
Things happened, people are dealing with consequences of it. But it's a good filler chapter, sort of. It reminds us what happened. It introduces quite a few things and characters that are going to be important later in the book and in other books. It reminds us that Harry's scar hurt. It reminds us that he's waiting for letters from Sirius. But it opens with reminding us that they absolutely ruined the life of that muggle, poor Mr. Roberts.
Poor Mr. Roberts.
And they're leaving, and he says Merry Christmas to them. And obviously this is happening in the summer. So, they must have ruined his memory and, removed his recollection and memory all the way back to, December.
Yeah, Mr. Weasley says that if there's, a really big, event, they can sometimes be, days after getting the memory wiped. It feels like his memory was wiped for the magical world's benefit, not for his own.
Absolutely.
Because, what happens to his family after this? They just, leave, and the ministry is just okay, well, they don't remember that, so everything's fine.
How do they know their memories come back after a few days or a few weeks? I highly doubt the ministry follows up as thoroughly. Maybe they have one follow-up scheduled, but if he doesn't remember when they follow up the first time, they're not going back to check again. There's no way the ministry is competent at their job. There's no way.
It's sad to think about.
They get in line and they port Key back home to the Weasley house, where Miss Weasley is absolutely beyond stressed and worried and so happy to see them all because she didn't hear anything specifically from them. It's not like they could text her, "Hey mom, not dead, all good, going to sleep, love you." There's none of that. So she thought they were all dead, and she's so excited to see them, and she's giving the twins a great big hug, and everyone is surprised. Everyone was shocked that she was hugging the twins, and I'm like, that's sad. Does she not often hug the twins?
I just think it's because of how they left things. I feel like it's a very real fear, I think, especially for parents, that their last words to someone could be something disparaging. She tells them basically "Oh, the last thing you would have ever heard from me if you had died is that I was disappointed about your exam marks, and in the real scheme of things, that's not a big deal." And I just do like the fact that this was written in the 90s, 2000s, where it's parents didn't always apologize. And I think that's a big theme in media right now, is just parents having emotional depth and being able to apologize to their children. And Mrs. Weasley does. And we love parents that apologize and admit their mistakes.
I just think it's sad that they're shocked she hugs them, because it makes it sound like she doesn't hug them a lot. And she's not just hugging them because she loves them. She's hugging them because she thought she would have to go through life not only with them being dead, but them being dead. And the guilt of having the last thing she said to them is what motivates her to hug them, more so than just being a loving mother. I feel like Molly and the twins got to work on some stuff.
Well, I think out of all the kids, they're the ones that have the conflict the most.
Yeah, but I mean, some of them have to, and they're not bad people. At least her kids aren't bad people.
Yeah.
They're reckless and they're troublesome and they don't always listen. But
I think a lot of it's growing pains, because her idea for the twins doesn't match what they are. And I feel like some people maybe have that feeling where your parents and you just kind of butt heads all throughout you growing up. But they reach a point when the twins are adults where it's she feels that they're obviously they're successful and they're managing everything well, and she's proud of them. But I feel like it was a lot of work to get there.
Yeah, I think it comes down to some extent that people want what's best for their family and friends, but they kind of want what they think is best for their family and friends. So what Miss Weasley wants her kids to have happy, successful lives, and what she thinks makes for happy, successful lives is a more stable, respectable job, more so than what the twins see for themselves. And I think that's still where they are.
Yeah.
In their relationship, is coming to terms with what I think will make them happy versus what will actually make them happy. But they want the same thing, which is happiness and stability and a decent life. But it takes a lot of time to realize that just because that's what you think will make them most happy does not mean that that's actually what will make them most happy. They would be miserable at desk jobs. Miserable.
Yeah, can you imagine? Oh my God. One of my favorite like little Britishisms is that Hermione goes and makes Mrs. Weasley like a really strong cup of tea after like this emotional upheaval, which is such a British thing. It's also a me thing. I feel like I always make people tea when there's like something's bad has happened or people are upset.
I think it's very common in a lot of places. Like I would do that too, or want that too. I think it's like the warm comfortingness of a cup of tea. And like a lot of teas are soothing if they're not too caffeinated. And also I think like if you're panicked, like Molly was like panicked, it like you can't hyperventilate while you sip your tea. Like it forces you to slow down your breathing, which calms you down. Instead of trying to calm them down starting with the emotional aspect, they're starting to calm her down starting with the physical aspect, and the emotion will follow.
It just feels nice and cozy, especially when Mr. Weasley puts like a shot of whiskey in it.
Especially because it's not even breakfast time. Like the sun just rose. And he's like, Molly needs a whiskey. This is one of those days.
But we get our first Rita Skeeter mention as Mr. Weasley sees the Daily Prophet has come out, and it's Rita's article causing fear and mayhem.
Mayhem indeed. Also, just like, it's so interesting to see that some things are very consistent, like the struggle and fight that exists between like the government and the press is a very real thing in all places at all times, and it's fun to see how it's represented in this particular book. Like it's a fantasy book, but like people really, there really is a sort of a war often in a lot of places between what the media publishes and what the government does.
I think especially in the UK with the royal family and like what's allowed and what isn't allowed.
Yeah. Interesting to see. And it's interesting to hear like Rita's making like people have a right to know what happened. And Rita isn't just telling them what happened. She's literally starting rumors.
Yeah.
It's drama. It's not real journalism.
Yeah, sensationalizing it. She's the tabloids.
Rita Skeeter really walks a very fine line between reporting the news and just like writing bad Tumblr imagines. This woman thinks a newspaper article on a tragic event is a good place to like stretch her creative writing muscles,
Yeah.
Like the prompt is terrorism at the World Cup, and I shall take said prompt and bodies everywhere in the woods.
Yeah, it reminds me kind of like the news now where everything is like so online that there's like the idea of like news that can be faked and like the lawsuits and stuff that's been happening lately where it's like there's all like these journalists that are like, we have to have journalistic integrity and report the truth. And then there's people that, like they want clicks because they want money and they want to like, get people talking.
Yeah, the amount of clickbaity titles that are like Taylor Swift scandal, blah 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 blah, and you're like, wait, what'd she do? And you click on it, and it's new outfit at the Eras tour. It's really cute. I mean, thanks for showing me, but I need to be shocked to read it to show me the cute outfit.
Yeah, I feel like Rita's like the original like clickbait writer. I'll have a lot to say about her and just the idea of like slander and writing about minors.
She should be in prison for so many reasons. And like Harry has money. It's really interesting that Harry, if he didn't make the Quidditch team, he would have had some energy, like to have some sort of thing he needs to do to entertain himself. He could have become like really litigious and like just sued people all the time because he has the money, and that would have been so funny. But like, could you imagine litigious, like Harry Potter who sues people for things because he has lots of money and you hurt his feelings? He's like, you know what, Draco? That's bullying. That's a crime. I'm going to take you to court.
He could have bought the Daily Prophet and like got her fired.
That would be like, it's a side story we never hear about, but we don't know he didn't do it. We don't know.
I mean, I don't know if the UK is as sue happy as the States, but it'd be funny to think about Harry just like getting in frivolous lawsuits just because he can.
And he would have won a lot of them because he's always vindicated as being correct in the end. So,
but Harry and Ron and Hermione go upstairs, and Harry confides in Ron and Hermione, about his scar hurting and this dream he had. But I found it interesting that he shields them from the knowledge that the dream was actually about Voldemort plotting to kill him. He just says someone. I just feel like it's very in Harry's character to kind of shield his friends and kind of like his hero like complex where like he doesn't want to burden his friends because he already knows that they're worried. he's already imagined their reactions, and they're basically to a T what he imagined. And it's just Harry's nature to kind of want to shield people.
He's a protector.
Even though Harry is probably really worried right now, and he probably could use friends to like rely on.
It's probably also annoying for Harry to like have to make everything about him. Like no one wants to be that person who thinks they're the center of the world all the time.
But Harry is the center of the world.
Yeah, and he's trying to be like, no, it's not about me, and it's totally about me. But like he's like, can it just be the thing and not the thing, but also specifically me? You know, like I can understand not wanting to have to be a part of the narrative all the time.
I also love Ron and Hermione's different versions of how to, you know, kind of like react after this like emotional upheaval that they've had like the last like 24 hours, where Hermione's like, you know what? Like, we need to go to bed. We need to, like, relax, whatever. And Ron's just like, Harry, you want to play Quidditch?
Yeah.
And Hermione's like, Ron, he doesn't want to play Quidditch. Like, he's worried. He's stressed. We need to go to bed. We need to, like, have a good night's sleep. And then Harry's like, yeah, sure.
I mean, I absolutely get it. When I'm really stressed about something that I can't resolve at that moment, and Harry can't resolve his scar hurting or Voldemort or the situation at the World Cup right now. So like the alternative is sitting there and thinking about it, or trying to sleep and thinking about it and ruminating about it and being stressed but not being stressed in a productive way that like leads to action being taken to resolve anything. So like it makes sense to just want to distract yourself. You know what? I can sit here and be sick about it, or I can go play Quidditch, not think about it, procrastinate thinking about it, because he could just have a break. He deserves to have a bit of a mental break in this particular situation, I think.
Yeah. Harry deserves a break.
And ruminating on everything isn't going to help.
I think it shows how Hermione processes things, where she wants to sit and think about it, like she's a worrier, and that's just what she does, and she just assumes that that's what they should do. But Harry and Ron are like, you know what? Like, we need a distraction. We need to take our minds off this.
Yeah, like I understand, because I am a worrier, I'm a ruminator, and like I could just sit there for hours being stressed about something and not coming to a resolution if I'm not in the right place to come to that resolution, or it's not the right time. So then I am the distraction person. I'm like, you need to distract me, we need to go somewhere, we need to do something, I need to watch something. It's either I'm stressing about this in a non-productive way, or I'm completely not thinking about it, but it's work to not think about it. So I get it, I totally get it.
Yeah, I'm definitely the same way.
I just want to say, they're all going to go grab their brooms and go out, fly around the pitch, the yard, whatever, play some Quidditch, because, you know, underage wizardry restrictions are just, they can be damned for all we care. Quidditch. Like, we learn in the first one that it's magic. It's magic. You say up, it's a spell, the broom is magic, you're magic. It's doing magic, and they're going to go do it for fun. But you're not allowed, and everyone's fine with it.
I feel like it's like kind of like a gray area where they're not technically doing the spell, which is the thing they don't want them to do. But because they're at a magic family, I feel like it's kind of like a gray area where it's not technically what you should be doing, but it's overlooked.
These rules are dumb.
Which isn't quite fair, because I feel like wizards that are in wizard families get kind of more freedom to do things than people in Muggle families would.
Yeah, because if the trace is localized, they could just be like, oh, it's just Mr. and Mrs. Weasley and Bill and Charlie and the twins playing Quidditch. Just the legal, it's definitely not Harry and Ron. Couldn't possibly be those two.
But we get a fun discussion with Percy and Mr. Weasley handling the fallout of the Quidditch World Cup at the Ministry, and Percy mentions Mundungas Fletcher putting in a claim for his tent.
I love that from Mundungas Fletcher. Honestly, like the false insurance claims, I guess they're the government, not his insurance policy, but like false reimbursement claims in order to get more money out of the government. I believe it. I see it. I understand it.
Yeah, but then Percy's like, I know for a fact he had a cloak put up on sticks for a tent. It's like the most Mundungus thing ever.
Pretending he had a jacuzzi when he really just slept under his coat and 2 sticks. Obviously, Mr. Weasley and Percy have been going into work to deal with this whole outcome of the Quidditch World Cup, and all the people being like, gee, the ministry that held this event probably should have had some better security and some things in place to deal with this kind of crap. And like, yes, absolutely, like the plan they had, the perfect plan, like not even like if something bad happens, this, like in a perfect situation, the original plan, not plan B, involved a muggle signing people in to his campsite.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so negligent. Like, it's almost like, to some extent, everything that happened to Mr. Roberts and his family is the fault of the ministry for deciding to involve him in this without his consent.
Yeah, they go to all this work to have like anti-muggle security, but they have a muggle running the campsite. which I think we talked about it last or 2 episodes ago. But yeah, it felt like a liability.
Like, if wizards have tents, obviously a wizard's camp. The fact that there are magical tents, where are the wizarding campsites? Can't we use one where there's a wizard at the door? Like, I don't understand. They could have had this event so many places where no muggles are intentionally involved and where it's very unlikely that muggles would accidentally show up. Like in the middle of the woods in like the Northwest Territories somewhere, in the middle of a desert somewhere, on the frickin' moon, okay? I bet they could go to the moon. This takes place in 1994. NASA went to or orbited the moon over 20 years earlier, and they've done it a whole bunch of times between the year of this event and the original moon landing. So, like, if the muggles can go to the moon, so can the wizards. Like, just do it on the moon. I don't understand. I don't understand why they just didn't do that.
I love that. Well, I found an interesting take when Percy was talking about the Ministry, he and Mr. Weasley working late. Percy actually talks like against his father, being like, oh, he should have known not to say anything without talking to his superior, and it was a mistake. And Percy's like of the person that I feel like respects his elders and all is about like social rules and being like the rule follower. Where this is like the first time he kind of like speaks like it's not badly, but he calls out his dad, and Mrs. Weasley kind of like snaps at him, like, don't say anything bad about your father. And it's kind of like the feeling where Percy's almost role at the Ministry is kind of like changing how he is in the family.
Yeah, I think this is one of the, because Percy loves the rules and he loves respecting authority. And I think this is one of the first times where different authority figures in his life clashed. So his father, who's an authority figure, said something that had a negative impact or went against the policies of the Ministry, who's the other authority in his life. So Percy, like, wanting to be a person who stands up for the right rules, had to like make a decision in his mind, and this is the first time where he made that decision and his values aligned more with the Ministry than his own family. It's like the first instance of that, and things start to crumble later on. But like, it's interesting to see it, and it's interesting to see like what Mr. Weasley did wasn't necessarily wrong. It was the truth, and like people have a right to know that much information, but at the same time it did have negative repercussions on the Ministry, and it made them look like idiots. And like, Mr. Weasley didn't do the wrong thing, but like Percy also gets both sides of it. Like, for us and everyone else, we like hear a little bit about it, but we're like, obviously Mr. Weasley is the good guy and he did the good thing. But if Percy's hearing the opposite from some of the people he respects.
It's also about the rule of things too. Like, Percy loves Mr. Crouch because of the rules and like the chain of command. And to Percy, it makes sense to him, like, oh, you should have asked your superior before you said anything.
Yeah.
But also, Mr. Weasley's worked at the Ministry for like way more years than Percy. Percy's just starting there. So it's just like he doesn't have that like seniority yet to kind of like feel things out.
Yeah. And I think Mr. Weasley very much has, I'm going to do what's right based on my moral compass.
Exactly.
And Percy right now has, I'm going to do what's right according to the rules set in place.
Exactly.
And so it's like morality versus authority, I guess. And Percy really respects the authority of government more so than the morality of doing what feels right.
Exactly. But yeah, definitely interesting to keep track of Percy and how he kind of like falls into his job and kind of like what that means for him and kind of away from like his family.
Yeah, how his job becomes his family almost.
But I also love this continued gag where Bill says something about his hair and Mrs. Weasley's like, oh, can I cut it? It's just really funny.
No, Miss Weasley, leave it. He looks good.
It reminds me of like visiting like my grandma or something, and there's just like one thing that they always say like, oh, I don't know quite about that, and they always like bring it up.
Nose ring. I have a nose ring, so I'm sure early on after I got it, there was a lot of, what'd you do to your face?
We also have at this moment when they're all talking around the fire that Fred and George are like in the corner, you know, whispering, doing Fred and George stuff, and Mrs. Weasley suspects that they're doing Weasley's
wizard wheezes.
Oh my god. Yeah, they're doing joke shop stuff, and they kind of play it off like, oh, Mom, do you want that to be the last thing you say to us, as like a joke? But I feel like this is the point where they're kind of starting to suspect Ludo of being disingenuous, because at this point they have to like notice that their gold is fake and not there anymore. And so I feel like this is the part where they're like writing to him being like, hey, I think you made a mistake.
You gave us fake gold.
So it's interesting to see it kind of like set up, because I feel like they definitely were like playing it off like they were, you know, just they tried to say, oh, we're doing homework, but no one believes that. And then with the joke shop stuff, I think they would have been a bit more secretive or elusive, but they kind of play it off as a joke. So it feels like it's covering up like the real situation going on here.
Absolutely. They're They're about to blackmail a government official, and I love that for them.
Yeah.
I think it's what they deserve. If you're dumb enough to be blackmailed by a couple teenagers as a government official, you should be better at government officialing.
It shows how bad Ludo is at his job and in life. We also have Percy and Hermione having this argument about Winky again.
Where Hermione is totally in the right.
Yeah, she's very much clashing with Percy, which is like very different. We talked about this last episode where they're both rule followers, but Hermione is definitely one that leads more into like a moral compass of what's right, where Percy is just blindly following the rules. And yet she brings up the fact that Winky is a slave because Mr. Crouch does not pay her.
Yeah, I think the thing about Hermione and Percy, and both being followers, both being rule followers, is that really, really early on, like in Hermione's first year, she came to a blatant choice where it was like, am I going to do the obvious right thing that saves my friends, saves the school, saves lives, and helps people, or am I going to follow the rules? And it was such an obvious choice in that moment. Like the following the rules were so outweighed by this obvious, yes, moral correctness, that she started practicing breaking the rules morally early on. And like when you start building habits when you're younger, you get more comfortable doing them and you're more susceptible to that. So like she built up a habit early on when the decision was easier and more obvious of doing the morally right thing over the rules when those